Our dear author, Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati, she has had an incredible spiritual experience all of a sudden in Rishikesh, as her and her husband had went to India. She was more so along for the ride because her husband was the one going on a bit of a spiritual pilgrimage, but all of a sudden, when she dipped into the Ganga, one of the holy rivers of India, an incredible spiritual vision of the Divine Mother overtook her, and she had absolutely no inclination of having any sort of spiritual experience here. That was our last chapter. Do check that out if you'd like to hear about it. Now we are beginning the 7th chapter. You must stay. The next days run into each other timelessly, rushing at the first light of day down to the river worshipped as the Mother, being pulled at night back into the sparse, green-hued hotel room with flickering blue tube lights, days of meditating on the banks of the river. I would not, however, have used the word meditating, for I had no semantic framework to put any of this in. One afternoon, as I walked up the steps from Ganga toward our hotel, I discovered an alternate route. Rather than walk downriver to the alley, I could stroll through an ashram just in front of the marble steps. The ashram's central pathway ran parallel to the alley and was, I soon discovered, much cleaner. The alley was the typical Indian gauntlet of cows, dogs, homeless people, and all their waste, bodily and otherwise. The ashram, on the other hand, was sparkling clean and reminded me of the children's area at Disneyland. Enormous blue statues of Shiva and Krishna filled the pathways. Out of another huge Shiva statue, a fountain of water flowed from the goddess Ganga, poised above Shiva's matted hair. Luscious gardens with flowers of many colors lined the central pathway, broken only by a host of life-size depictions of gods, goddesses, and scenes from Hindu scriptures. As I learned later, when tasked with writing about the statues for a visitor's guide, one is the half-man, half-lion Narasimha avatar of Vishnu, killing the demon king Hiranyakashipu with devoted Prahlad looking on. Another is Mother Yashoda, seeing the universe in the open mouth of her young son, Bhagawan Krishna. Yet another is Saint Raidas, with his chest cut open to expose his heart, upon which lie the sacred threads. If I had been in a small boat touring the ashram, the tune of "It's a Small World" would have been perfectly in place here, seemingly. The ashram became my pathway between the hotel and the banks of the Ganga. A walk I took several times a day, rushing out of the hotel early each morning and inevitably having to return to use the restroom at least a few times before Jim came, my husband, to get me after sunset. One day, as I walked through the ashram, I heard a clear, stable voice, a man's voice, saying, "You must stay here." I looked around to see who had spoken, but the pathway was empty. I looked up, and there was no one on the balconies above. If the voice had come from the central gardens, it would have had to be a shout, not the gentle voice I had just heard. No one had spoken. If no one was around, there couldn't have been a voice, I reasoned. I must have imagined it, so I kept walking. 30 seconds later, I heard it again. a soft, calm male voice, as though spoken by a gentleman in the seat next to me on a plane or train. "You must stay here." Again I looked, and the pathway and balcony were still empty. Meditative though I had become, I was sure I hadn't lost my common sense. Clearly, if there was a voice, there had to be a speaker. If there was no speaker, there was no voice. The only people who heard voices were schizophrenics and Joan of Arc. My experiences, since I had first laid eyes on Ganga, had been expansive and whole, not the fragmentation of schizophrenia. I was not delusional. Yet, if I wasn't delusional, and I wasn't Joan of Arc, who had spoken? No one was there, so no one had spoken. I could not have heard a voice. Then I heard another voice, recognizably my own. It said, speaking in the authoritative, commanding second person to which I was accustomed, "You are about to ignore a very strong sign. You are about to pretend that you didn't hear a voice just because it doesn't make sense. You are free to do that, but it is a violation of your vow to keep your heart open. You promised you would keep your heart open to any signs of why you came to India. You promised that if you couldn't keep your heart open, you would leave." The eternal reproach continued. "So if you are going to pretend that you didn't hear a voice, you must go back to Delhi and get on a flight home to San Francisco. You cannot break your own vow." I was not in the mood to navigate a return trip to Delhi or to leave India yet. Along with the ecstasy, I was fighting a cold. I had therefore one choice. Conceding to my own ultimatum, I walked off the central pathway and onto a smaller pathway in the Paramarth Niketan the Paramarth Niketan Ashram, toward a large sign with "Office" painted on it in English. "I would like to stay here," I told the man behind the counter. He and 3 other gentlemen sat cross-legged on a thin mattress behind a low wooden desk. He did not respond. He just looked at me. "Excuse me. I would like to please stay here," I repeated, slower and louder, careful to enunciate my words. He continued to stare at me. Was I actually speaking? Were my lips making sound, or was I imagining this as well? "Is it possible? Can I stay here? How much does it cost?" He continued, just to stare at me. Not the kind of lascivious stare that makes you feel naked. He just stared as though it were too much trouble to move his eyes away. He clearly had no intention of responding. I turned to the other 2 men. They immediately busied themselves shuffling papers from one side of the deck to the other. "Excuse me, please," I tried again. "Can I please stay here?" One of the paper-shuffling men rose and returned a moment later with a 4th man who spoke to me in English. "You want to stay here?" he asked. "Yes, please," I gasped, grateful for someone who spoke at all, and doubly grateful it was English. Doubly grateful it was English. "There is nothing for you here," he responded, matter-of-factly. "All of our programs are in Hindi. Even the yoga classes are in Hindi. There is nothing in English. Also, you must get up early in the morning for the 5 o'clock prayer ceremony, and that is also in Hindi. You should go to the ashram down the road. They have classes in English." Thank you so much. I walked quickly out of the ashram, excited to tell Jim and my husband that I had found a place with classes in English, and equally pleased to ignore the implication of the mysterious voice I had heard. When we arrived in the ashram further downriver, I immediately felt repelled. This was not where I was supposed to be. They did have a full day's activities in English, yoga, meditation, philosophy, but I needed to get back to Niketan. The voice had become a rope pulling me back. I hurried back to Niketan and pleaded with the man in the office who spoke English. I will get up at any time that you say. I will sit through whatever you say I need to sit through. Whether I understand it or not, it doesn't matter. I just want to stay here. Please. Actually, he replied, we do not have the authority. You are a girl, and you are a foreigner. You can only stay here with permission from our president. Okay, great. No problem. Please let me meet the president so I can ask him. Actually, he is out of town. Oh, I replied, my heart sinking a bit. When will he return? Maybe tomorrow, the tall man replied. Great. I will come back tomorrow. I had not read the section in the India guidebook that explains that people in India, and especially in the service class, will tell you whatever they think you want to hear. Truth is less important than goodwill, and the highest goal is to keep you happy. Is my faucet fixed? Oh yes, ma'am, the faucet is fixed. You're happy to hear this news, so his goal is accomplished. However, what he hasn't taken into consideration is how short-lived your happiness will be when you discover that actually, no, the faucet has not been fixed and your bathroom is flooded. So, when the gentleman in the office said, maybe tomorrow, I took it to mean, maybe tomorrow, not recognizing that it really meant, I have no idea. For the next many days, I returned to ask, is he here yet? Not yet, was the daily reply. Maybe tomorrow. Thus we conclude Chapter 7. Thank you for listening. Let us explore Chapter 8 in our next reading session. Namaste.